Hi, this is Ira Gorlick, and this is the continuing discussion on monopolies. Monopolies have some both positive and negative connotations that go along with it, and it certainly affects our perception of net neutrality. So, just to define monopoly so that we're all working on the same basis, monopoly is a situation in which a single company or group owns all or nearly all the market for a given type of product or service. By definition, a monopoly is characterized by an absence of competition. And lack of competition often results in high prices, inferior products, and lack of innovation. There are a number of major inefficiencies associated with monopolies, and they include allocative inefficiency, where prices tend to be higher, output lower than what would exist in a market with a lot of competition. Also, weakened market forces, where consumers of a product have many alternatives. Producers must serve their customers efficiently in order to stay in business. If consumers can't purchase competitive products easily, the monopolist doesn't need to worry a lot about losing customers when per service or per quality good is provided. And we all have the example of the cable company or the phone company customer service. And I'm going to talk more about this later, but rent or favor seeking, firms and or individuals will put a great deal of effort into obtaining or maintaining high entry barriers. By doing so, they hope to achieve monopoly-type profits. Such efforts enrich some people at the expense of many others. And this will point to the 1934 Telecommunications Act and specifically to net neutrality. In essence, what's happening is that the monopolists are looking for rent seeking here. And we're going to go over that in more detail. Now, I find it interesting is that what you think about monopolies might say more about your political beliefs than your economic beliefs. From my perspective, which of course I could be wrong, and if I am wrong, and if you're a conservative and you take this the wrong way, then please, let's talk about it in the discussions. But I believe that conservatives tend to be much less afraid of monopolies than progressives. And again, I'm very interested in your all's view on this. One reason I think that conservatives don't like to criticize monopolies is they believe that the community has no real way of knowing who is more worthy of the two parties, the monopolist or the consumer. And in this way, I agree with conservatives. How does the community know which is the more worthy of the two parties? Though, when I wrote this, it did raise an interesting question for me, is do conservatives ever think the consumer is more worthy of community protection than companies? And if they do, how? Though it's possible that what's happening in the conservative mindset here is that if progressives are for it, then they must be against it. Hopefully, though, most reasonable people, conservatives or progressives, have a more nuanced view of monopolies, which is why I'm teaching this class, to understand those nuances. The question then becomes, do monopolies actually exist? And my answer is yes. Throughout history, there are many examples of a monopoly. Standard Oil is the one that comes to mind first. By 1890, Standard Oil controlled 88% of the refined oil flows in the United States. At the turn of the century, the company controlled 91% of oil production and 85% of its final sales. Among the laundry list of complaints, the lawsuit that was brought against Standard Oil said that Standard Oil had engaged in discriminatory practices in favor of the combination by railroad companies, restraint and monopolization by control of pipelines, and unfair practices against competing pipelines. Another example of a monopoly is De Beers. In 1888, Cecil Rhodes received financing from the gold and diamond magnate Alfred Byatt and founded De Beers. De Beers, which has grown to encompass every aspect of the diamond trade, has a well-documented and well-established history of engaging in monopolistic practices. The primary complaint leveled against the company is its purchasing and stockpiling of rough diamonds in order to inflate prices by controlling the available supply. On July 13, 2004, De Beers pleaded guilty to engaging in price fixing on industrial diamonds. So, are monopolies good? Sometimes some people believe monopolies are a good thing. An example are public monopolies, set up by governments to provide essential services. Some believe that utilities should offer public goods and services such as water and electricity at a price that it's affordable to everyone. And telecommunications falls into this group, which is why we spend at any time on monopolies, is that you cannot have a discussion of telecommunications economics without talking about monopolies. So let me answer some questions. I don't know if I answered any questions here, which is interesting. I'm trying to answer questions, but I'm not sure if I did or not. Perhaps as we go through these discussions on monopolies, we can come up with some common agreements. Remember that I'm looking for areas where we can all agree, not just areas where we disagree. In the next lecture, I'm going to begin my discussion of natural monopolies with just an overview. Because natural monopolies are so important to telecommunications, I'm going to break this into multiple parts.